see what the drinker thinks. It should be fun. The critics were definitely wrong. Go subscribe to the Critical Drinker. Tell them Tyrone Magnus sent you.
Michael Jackson, an icon of 1980s culture that transcended music to become one of the most instantly recognizable names on the planet. Yeah, his later career was dogged by controversies, accusations, and his increasingly bizarre appearance, but at his peak, he was bigger than Beyonce, Taylor Swift, and whatever the hell this is supposed to be combined. And since we seem to be living in the era of the biopic right now, it was kind of inevitable we'd get a movie about him sooner or later. And well, here it is.
Yep.
And just like the man himself, Jesus, it really has made a splash, bringing in over $200 million in its opening weekend alone and shattering box office records for a biopic movie.
That's right.
Critics hated it, audiences loved it, and now that I've seen it for myself, I can kind of see why both sides feel the way they do. So we might as well get the obvious stuff out.
Yeah, there's things that they gloss over or don't include, and people they don't include, and situations they don't include. And not just the controversies, but there's other things. Just as a fan, when I gave my review, I was like, just certain things that aren't in there. And I'm like, well, why weren't, you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, some people felt like it was a highlight reel of his life, or at least that half of his life. And it kind of did feel that way. But just because it might have felt like a highlight reel doesn't mean it didn't feel good. You know what I'm saying? That it didn't entertain you. There's, I guess you could say, a formulaic process that certain movies go through, and how certain people look through movies through a specific lens of how they should be made and how they go. And I get that. But some do steer off to the left or to the right sometimes and do things differently. And as a fan, I walked away pleased, but wanting more, knowing that it had flaws. But I was pleased. You get what I'm saying?
The way first, if you're expecting a warts and all look at the man himself, deconstructing the mythos around him and showing the good, bad, and the ugly sides of Michael Jackson,
Nope.
You're kind of out of luck on this one. This movie was made with the blessing of Michael's family. Damn man, his own nephew plays the lead role. So in a lot of ways, it's a sanitized, respectful kind of film that portrays Michael in the best possible light and tactfully ends its narrative before the, more uncomfortable stuff that happened later in his life.
Yeah.
So from a...
it would be interesting if someone made a movie, although I don't know if it would be respectful, but it would be, there's a lot of different stories out there about him that don't go along with, like, the mainstream narrative of who he was. And I'm not talking about even the controversy. I'm talking about just other things, about how certain people met him and what he told them and what he said to them, and how, like, I think I could have swore it was Brooke Shields when she first met him, and what he told her when he sat down and he was cussing and just being a regular dude, the way he was talking to her, and, stories like that, and like stories about how, I forgot who it was, but a particular star was chilling in his, trailer, and Michael Jackson wanted to meet him, and when he walked in with two bad chicks on him, you know what I mean, and was kissing him and talking to him, and they was all on him, and he was just, and it would, threw him off. Like, I remember somebody telling that story, like, all that different type of stuff that wasn't the mainstream thing. I just saw Teddy Riley talking about the reason why he spoke high. He said he had a deep voice. But the reason why he spoke high is because his vocal coach, who Teddy Riley, I think, called the greatest vocal coach in the world, told him, basically, I'm paraphrasing, to keep that high pitch that you sing in, you're going to have to train your muscles and your voice to be able to do that as you're getting older. So you need to speak high. No matter who you talk to, you speak high. So it became part of the, persona that he sold to the public, even though he had a deeper voice. You see what I'm saying? So whenever Michael was speaking, he was training. See, all that type of stuff, that deeper stuff, little details about life, that's what I'm talking about. I want to see stuff like that. I would love to see stuff like that, whether good or bad. But if it's, a bunch of different collection of stories from different stars and people that met him, that can be verified a little, But, sometimes things can veer off and may not be real. But you guys get what I'm saying, like, I don't even know if it ever happened. Some people say it's true. People say it's not true. But they said that Michael Jackson chipped up Tupac at a party for disrespecting Quincy Jones' daughter, who he was dating at the time. So Michael Jackson viewed her as a niece, and he told him not to be talking to him like that. And, Tupac. So Tupac wanted to fight. And they said because Joe Jackson was a former boxer, he taught all his boys to fight. Well, Michael showed him he could fight that night. So you see what I'm saying? Like, I whether it's true or not, but if it was true, I'd like to see that story. I'd like to see that played out on the big screen if it was true.
Purely biopic point of view, it's a slightly unsatisfying half of a story, carefully curated and structured to avoid tarnishing its subject. That being said though, as a story of surviving abuse and exploitation, personal and artistic growth, and ultimately becoming a true artist in his own right, Michael's a pretty fucking good movie all on its own, driven by a commanding performance from Jafar Jackson, helped by a great supporting cast and enough dramatic highs and lows to keep you engaged for 2 hours. So, let's discuss it, shall we? The story kicks off in the mid-1960s with a young Michael getting press-ganged into the pop group the Jackson 5, formed and managed by his domineering and abusive father Joseph. And believe me, this guy does not fuck around. Rehearsals are brutal and unrelenting, physical punishments are a regular incentive to keep everyone focused, and as the lead vocalist, Michael himself gets pushed hardest of all. Eventually though, their hard work pays off. The group starts playing gigs and eventually it leads to their first record deal a few years later. By the 1970s, the Jackson 5 are topping the charts and they're selling out arenas across America, with Joseph himself as the undisputed patriarch of the family. All is not well with young
manager
Michael.
And everything.
Not only is he starting to suffer from vitiligo that starts to fuck up his self-image, but he's frustrated by his father's smothering influence and wants to branch out as a solo artist. Naturally, his dad does everything in his power to hold him back, knowing the group would fall apart without him, until finally matters come to a head in 1981 when he legally fires Joseph, by fax no less.
Yep.
Damn man, the 80s were just awesome. The next few years lead to some of Michael's biggest hits like Thriller and Billie Jean. He's riding high as one of music's biggest...
Nowadays you could get fired by something very similar, but much faster, known as an email. You've got mail.
Stars, but Joseph isn't done with him yet and eventually pressures him into coming back for the Jackson 5 reunion tour, something that would have repercussions for the rest of Michael's life.
It was messed up how he pressured him into coming back. If you see it, it's like, yo, man, come on.
But can he finally break free of his father's influence and stand on his own, or will the man who made him ultimately break him? One of the biggest talking points around this movie has got to be the disconnect between critics and audience scores, which is just fine by me because critics are fucking assholes who are only in business for themselves anyway. Not me though, dear viewer. The drinker will never steer you wrong. But like I said earlier, I can at least see why both sides feel the way they do. Michael is not really the kind of brutally honest, unflinching insight into the man's life that professional critics were probably hoping for. It's very much a sanitized, approved version of events where Michael is the innocent oppressed victim and the valiant artist struggling to find himself. It makes sure to end its narrative on an upbeat, feel-good note of victory before all the controversies and the accusations that would dog him in his later career. It's less of a truthful biopic of the man and more like a Hollywood love letter to the legend. Yeah, there's little hints about his eccentricities and his growing problem with self-image, but it's never allowed to overshadow the main narrative. This film is really a chance to remember him as he was in his prime, a slightly idealised version of the real man that audiences can easily empathise with and root for. And credit to Jafar Jackson here, the guy plays him perfectly. His movements, his mannerisms, his artistic intensity, it's all there and it's exactly what you'd expect from a guy who grew up with Michael and knew him for real.
Someone asked me, AI or not, and there were certain parts with the crowd where I was like, is that an AI crowd? Yeah, you're kind of like, you have these moments when you're watching where you're like, wait a minute. Yeah, so maybe there was.
That being said, the rest of the Jackson 5 aren't all that well represented. You don't get much of an insight into their own aspirations as artists or people, which I sort of understand because the movie only has 2 hours to play with, and trying to juggle all those extra characters would have caused a lot of narrative bloat. But shit, man, Janet Jackson doesn't even show up at all. I mean, she was a pretty big deal all by herself, and I'd assume she was a big part of Michael.
Well, she's the one that said that she didn't want to be represented in the movie, so that's why.
Michael's life as he was growing up, but it's like she doesn't even exist in this movie. Weird. Naturally, there's your typical biopic villain in the form of his dad, a sinister, controlling presence simultaneously trying to leech off his talent and hold him back from his true potential. Credit to Coleman Domingo, by the way. He's a commanding presence and he actually looks distractingly close to the real man. There's the second act low point where a pyrotechnic accident leaves Michael with severe burns and a lifelong addiction to...
I saw the real video of when his hair caught fire. If you watch the movie, it takes longer for the people to get to him to put the fire out and help him. They're actually on him really fast in the real video.
Painkillers. And there's even the third act redemption where a physically scarred but emotionally powerful Michael finally rebels against his father and becomes the man he was meant to be. It's all there, it all slots neatly into the standard Hollywood biopic mold, and as far as I'm concerned, the end result is a perfect crowd-pleasing movie. It's not particularly complex or accurate, but I put it into a similar category to something like Braveheart, a movie that was a wildly inaccurate distortion of real historical events that were much more complex and morally grey, but it was also a powerful epic drama that got everyone fired up.
Good.
Basically, if you're expecting a dark, complex and realistic portrayal of his life and career, you're probably going to be disappointed here. On the other hand, if you're a fan of Michael Jackson or you just want to experience a feel-good story of artistic and personal triumph, then you're probably going to love it. And you know what? Sometimes, maybe that's enough.
See, that's what I was saying.
That's all I've got for today. Go away now.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You know, sometimes it's the way certain movies are made. They're not formulaically the greatest movie ever. But it's just, it worked for the crowd. You know, so sometimes they are bad movies. Sometimes they're just different. You see what I'm saying? I felt like this one was different, even though I know what people have a problem with. I think it's more different than you can call it a bad movie. You see what I'm saying? No pun intended. Post your comments down below. Let me know what you all thought. If you enjoyed my reaction and commentary, hit the like button, subscribe, and share. 10 million subscribers. Woo!